This program is part of the Devil's Mark Podcast Network, the official podcast network of Shadow Path Diabolism.
Hi, everybody. This is Brother Nero, and this is the second episode of the Devil's Mark Ministry Podcast. And I'm here with Julia Blair, my co-host. How are you, Julia?
I'm doing okay. How are you today?
I'm doing good. I'm actually having a pretty good day. I think we're actually getting this recording done. We've been a bit behind, and I think I should tell everybody, that we mean to do this like about once every 2 weeks at a minimum, but for some reason it just hasn't worked out that way lately. We've been busy trying to do some things, and I think you'll talk to them about that. So you want to tell them a little bit about what we're going to talk about today?
Yeah, so today I thought it might be interesting to talk about things like gatekeeping in satanic religions, how prevalent it is, why it really doesn't make a lot of sense a lot of the time, and the few instances, there are very few, but there are some, where it might be necessary, like some gates kind of need to be kept, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, you have to have some standards, because this is not the type of religion where you can just trust anybody. I admit that I'm probably a little bit less trusting than most people, and it's because I've had a lot of bad experiences, as I've pointed out to a lot of people. But I don't recommend that you be like me and be as suspicious of people as I am, because I think it's been detrimental to my occult practices and building long-term friendships and stuff. But there is a need to be cautious if you're in this religion. So there is a need for gatekeeping to a certain extent. And I would also recommend to any new diabolist out there that you always follow your instincts. You always kind of go with your gut feeling, because your gut feeling is usually never wrong. And since we believe Satan is a god of nature, it only stands to reason that we would look at him as someone who would teach us to be in line with our instincts. It's a very big part of our religion. And I'll be talking about that on my podcast in the next week or so.
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing about the gatekeeping is on its most basic level, any newcomer will run into this. You get it a lot from non-theists, but I've seen it from people who follow theistic Satanism and diabolism as well. But people are also, they're very quick to assert that their way is the only way. And if you don't worship their way, you're not a real diabolist or a Satanist. And that is, I think, the kind of thing that is toxic in the community. It's pretty silly, because as long as the person isn't harming the free will of others or trying to push their views on you, the way they practice really doesn't affect you. Your religion is ultimately between you and the gods, and you should be able to practice ultimately in whatever way you feel honors them best. And that doesn't take away from other spiritual experience, in my opinion.
No, and I think one of the things we try to do is we try to make shadow path diabolism open enough and kind of give people the space to practice as they will. Now, we have specific rituals that we're going to be doing within the ministry, and specific things we're going to be doing, so that we have some uniformity and some commonality within the religion. Obviously, that's what makes a religion. You have to have common rituals, common traditions, and that sort of thing. But we want to leave it open as far as how you practice, how you worship on an individual basis, because we believe that Satan is the one who gave us free will and self-awareness. And to make some arbitrary rules about how you have to practice, or which demons you can work with, or what hierarchy you have to use, or whatever, is the opposite of everything that Satan stands for and everything that he gave us, the gifts that he gave us. So we try to be as accommodating as possible, and we try to let the individual choose whatever path or whatever method works for them within the context of the tradition. I think that's very important. And a lot of satanic groups don't do that. They try to tell people what to believe, how to believe, and they must do this and they must do that. And you have to do it our way, and our way is the only way. If you don't do it our way, you're not true, as you said. And I think that's one of the main differences between shadow path diabolism and diabolism or Satanism, is that we try to give the power back to the individual to honor the gods in the way that they feel is best for them, while still staying true to the basic core principles of shadow path diabolism.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an important thing to learn. It's difficult for people who are just starting out. I know from my own experience that it's important to have someone saying that, where, you have the right to practice in the way that you feel is best, because it's difficult. You're coming into this, you're exploring this whole new community, and you have people on all sides saying, no, you're doing it wrong. That's not the way that it's supposed to be done. You're not a real diabolist. You're not a real Satanist. And it's difficult to learn when you're surrounded by that, to trust in yourself and trust in what you're doing. So if I had to give advice for someone who's in the same place that I was, as long as you're honoring the gods, respecting the laws of the place where you live, and not trying to control anyone else's practice, no one has that right to dictate your spiritual path to you. And you should be wary of anyone who seems like they're saying that they know better than the gods. You need to be confident in your own spirituality. Often you need to be confident in your own spirituality before you interact with a lot of people in a spiritual way, because everyone has their own opinions, and they should, but they can't force you to agree with them or come into your space and just tell you what to think.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I always notice is that when people are insistent about doing things a certain way, or when they're insistent on imposing their views on other people, or forcing people to comply through arbitrary rules or whatever, it's always, and it's kind of becomes obvious that there's other things motivating these people. They have ulterior motives. They want to control people for their own ends. And that is something that every new diabolist, every new Satanist always needs to be aware of. That's why I say follow your instincts. If you get the feeling that a group leader or a group is trying to control you and manipulate you so that they can get you to do things that you're uncomfortable with, you should always, always question that. And usually, if somebody's very strict about the rules and tries to control everything you do, it's because their motives are not religious. There's something else going on there, and you better get away from it very quickly. You
Yeah.
know?
That said, you shouldn't, however, feel entitled to go into someone else's space and assert your own beliefs over theirs if your beliefs don't mesh with theirs. You shouldn't just go into like a coven or whatever and just expect them to cater to you if your ways of practicing don't line up. But honestly, why would you want to? It just creates more conflict. It distracts you from the spiritual aspect, which is what's really important. Don't expect people to change themselves for you. Find someone who you work with better, or just go solo. There's a lot to be said for solitary practice, especially if you're just starting out and you're trying to find your way and trying to find what path suits you best. And don't necessarily panic if you can't find people right away that you work with well. That can take a while, and it's worth finding people who, it's worth finding the people that are right for you. It's worth taking the time to do that rather than rushing into something that's not right and trying to bend over backwards or force them to change so that you line up a bit better.
Yeah, I've talked about that a lot on my podcast. There are people that will come into a coven and they don't like the way the coven operates, and they'll try to change it to fit them. Well, if you don't like the way the coven operates, what are you doing in that coven in the first place? You can always leave. You can always start your own thing, or you can always find a group of people that are more in line with what you believe. There's no reason to stay somewhere just because it's all you can find. And I know a lot of people will say, well, in my area, this is all I have. Well, then if you really believe that you need to find something, if you really believe that you need to find a different group, then you need to start it if it's not available. But then again, you have people that start stuff who don't know anything about the occult. They'll start a group just to start a group, and they've been practicing for 6 months. And then the next thing you know, they'll be calling themselves high priest or high priestess of this and high priest of that. And they have no clue what they're talking about. And they just go on Facebook and run their mouth about whatever, and that's also wrong. But at some point, you have to start somewhere. And if you can't find a group of people that believe what you believe, the next best thing is to start something of your own and just be honest with people. You don't have to pretend to be high priest of this or high priest of that. You don't have to do the grand poopah thing. You just say, hey, I'm trying to start a group and I'm trying to create a system of occultism or religion that suits me. And I'm looking for other people that share my beliefs. It's as simple as that. Maybe start with a little honesty. If people would be a little bit more honest in the occult and in Satanism and in diabolism, we would get rid of a lot of the problems we have in this community if people would just start being honest about who they are and stop trying to pretend to be something they're not. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Pretending to be something you're not just causes trouble in the long run because, you can't keep up being someone that you're not. It's just, you know, eventually things are going to fall apart for you. And why start out like that? Just start out with, a community rather than a stratified hierarchical coven. Like, you don't necessarily need to be, I'm running this, I know everything. You could start a group of people who just want to learn together, and you want to be able to pick apart, sources and together and analyze things and say, well, this person says this. What do we think about this? This isn't in line with my experience. More of a, I hesitate to call it a support group, but kind of a way that people can learn together. And if there is nothing in your area, the internet is a marvelous resource, and being able to find people online is a lot easier than finding people specifically in your geographical area. Connect with people from all over the world. You never know where you might meet someone who you really mesh with.
Yeah. So do you want to talk about some of the projects that we have going on?
Yeah, sure. Actually, before I do that, there is a point that I want to bring up because I want to say as I said, there are some gates that need to be kept, and I think it's important to say that if someone's acting in a way that's detrimental to the satanic or the diabolism community as a whole, then we should absolutely speak out against that. Things like white supremacy, things like murder are not okay in any context. And even things like church burning or vandalism put satanic religions in a really bad light. And we already have so much backlash against us from the public that we probably shouldn't be encouraging that negative image. If only for our own safety, people can react aggressively and honestly really violently in response to satanic religions. And as much as I believe in free will and living how you want, regardless of social norms, we do still have to coexist with society. So if you're an anti-cosmic Satanist, then it's your right to hold those beliefs, but just don't kill anybody while you're doing it. It's not an unreasonable standard to have. And I think it's important to say that because there's a fine line between people can practice however they want, and you probably shouldn't practice in a way that harms you or the people around you.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm glad you said that because one of the things that people don't tend to realize, the people that are violent and are criminal, and again, I want to stress, not everybody that's a Satanist, not everybody that listens to black metal is a criminal or an idiot. And I want to stress that because everybody kind of knows that I have this kind of anti-black metal sort of thing. I'm very anti-black metal community because of the stupidity associated with a lot of the black metal community. But I know that not everybody's an idiot. But one of the things I do want to say to kind of emphasize what you said is that, the people that do engage in criminal behavior tend to not highlight the fact that when they do that, like when they do vandalism of churches or when they burn churches, all that happens is the church gets rebuilt bigger than it was before. The Christians get seen as martyrs by their community, and people pour money into the church and make it bigger and increase the congregation. So when you do criminal activity, you're not helping Satanism in the long run. You may think you are by doing something silly or whatever, but in the end, it's all of us that have to deal with the results of your actions. you know it's us that have to deal with the consequences because we have to talk to the people and explain to them that not everyone is like that, not everyone is stupid like that. And in the end, if you give Christians ammunition to use against you, then you're not helping Satan, you're not helping his kingdom, and you're certainly not helping yourself or your community. So I think that's very important to say as well.
Yeah. So, ministry updates. There's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of really exciting stuff that's coming together. We're going to be putting out an audiobook version of the newsletter. It's all done and it sounds great. So we're going to get it up on Audible and a few other platforms as soon as they allow us to. We're also going to be offering the first issue of the newsletter for sale on Amazon Kindle. So if you are not a patron and you want to access the newsletters, they'll become available as ebooks, usually a few months after the fact. The next issue of the newsletter is going to be out on June 6th for patrons. And if you would like to get the newsletters when they're released, because they are relevant to the time of the year, And if you'd like to get early access to the podcasts, and even if you'd just like to support the ministry, come join us on Patreon.
Yeah. I mean, we could always use the support. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we couldn't do what we're trying to do without the support of our patrons, and their help makes a big difference. And it's going to make it possible for us to continue to grow and continue to put out all kinds of new stuff. So if you're listening on Patreon, thank you. We really appreciate you. We always need support, and we couldn't do this without people backing us. And as far as other things, we're gearing up for our first outreach event. We're going to, as Nero has said before, we're going to do a couple that aren't publicized first to kind of get our feet wet and get used to the whole process. And then we're going to publicize the third one. And we're going to have hopefully some print issues of the newsletter. We're going to have some flyers that talk about Shadow Path Diabolism available for people. And somewhere down the line, we're hoping to have some merchandise or some fun stuff that people might be interested in. So it's going to be really exciting, and it's really taking shape in a way that I hadn't foreseen, and I'm really psyched about, honestly.
Yeah, I don't think any of us really thought we would be able to do as much as we're doing. I know to the patrons and to many people online, it may not seem like we're doing much, but it's mainly because we're kind of holding back until we have some things to announce. We're kind of holding back on the website. We're not updating the website as much and doing as much on YouTube until we have some actual things to announce, until we accomplish a couple of things. You know, as Alexander the Great would say, it doesn't matter what you say, it matters what you do or what you've done. So that's kind of the way we look at it. There's no point in doing video after video or podcast after podcast until we have something to announce. And the only reason I'm doing this podcast now, in fact, the ministry podcast, because I just don't want the patrons to think that we're not doing something, or the people on YouTube, for that matter, that think that we're not doing something, that we're just kind of sitting back and not actually working on things. We are actively working on things and trying to pull things together. As I've said in the past episodes and on my own podcast, you know, this first year is going to be about trying to put things together. And then in year 2, we're hoping to do more public stuff. And we're hoping to, you know, start doing rituals for people and start helping people with religious services and things like that. But this first year is all about trying to get the organization together and trying to get used to functioning as an organization and trying to get our staff used to functioning as a staff, as a leadership team. So I think that's very important. And I say that a lot, but it really has been more of a struggle with COVID than we expected. And plus, we're distanced. We're far apart. You know, we have two members of the leadership team that are in England, and I'm here in the States. So we're constantly doing this, you know, over Zoom and Skype and all kinds of stuff. So it does lead to some complications when you're trying to arrange events and stuff. So it's kind of slowed us down a bit, but we're still chugging along pretty consistently. And we hope to have some big announcements coming up shortly.
Yeah, absolutely. And keep an eye on the website, keep an eye on our social media, because we want to wait till we have something to show for it. But when we have something, we'll announce it everywhere that we can. So just keep an eye on things, and as soon as something develops, we'll keep you guys updated and let you know.
Yep, sounds good. Is there anything else you need to bring up in this episode?
No, I think that about covers everything that I had planned.
Yeah, I think that's about it. We just wanted to give everybody an update and let people know we're still around. We're still doing what we're supposed to be doing, or what we said we would do. We're a little bit behind schedule on our projects, but we are working steadily, and we hope to have some neat stuff for you in the near future, as I said. And for anybody that is in England that does want to get involved in the ministry, we strongly encourage you to look us up, because our primary focus right now is focusing on building the membership up in England, because that's always been my goal. Even though I'm the founder of the ministry and I'm American, I've always seen the Shadow Path Diabolism tradition as a British tradition. because of the experiences I've had in the southwest of England around Exeter and all those areas. I've had some very strong spiritual experiences that changed my life and changed my views on things. I've always had a connection with Satan, but I had very dramatic experiences that changed my views. And so the southwest of England has a very special place in my heart. It's very sacred to me. So I made a decision that the first chapter I want to have of this ministry has to be in England. And so that's why our focus is on developing relationships with people in England. So if you really are interested in shadow path diabolism and you are in England, we strongly encourage you to get in touch with us and fill out an application for membership and let us talk to you about what we have planned.
Absolutely.
Anyway, that's about it for this episode. May Satan be with you. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.